Good afternoon. I would like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater. I'm your chairperson today. I'm joined on the panel by Cynthia Stevens and Richard Whitbread. Our city assessor is Rob Lucky, and our admin secretary is Michelle Nathan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible, and as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. You can swear everybody in.
Can you state your full name, please?
Robert Allen Lucky.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Oh, we're gonna alter the time. Do you affirm or swear? Can you state your full name, please?
You can't let me through.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Good afternoon, Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, Mr. Lucky.
Thanks. Good afternoon.
And whenever you are ready to start.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No worries.
Excuse me. File number 191768 is roll number 0800412270. This property is located at 9 Marlene Street. I'll show you later the picture of the property, but it's located in St. Vital. It's backing on the Seine River. This is a 13-building townhouse project with an apartment building. And it was built in 1972. It's a Manitoba housing project. There's 98 suites. Page 3, we have, it's 32 two bedrooms, 36 threes, and 34 bedrooms. And we agree on the NOI. The only difference is the cap rate. And there's, I guess, the pages aren't numbered, but it would be page 7. After page 6, there's a site plan, and that's the Seine River that winds along behind, and that would be Southdale's, very exclusive bay backing on there as well on the other side of the river. And I guess further down the same with the Nacwa Golf Course. So it's a good location, and it's a prime piece of property. There's 4.3 acres, so it's, like I said, a lot of land, and haven't really sorted it out yet. It looks like one of the buildings is new, but or fairly new, because there is a permit for a building. And that's about all I have to say on that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any questions, Mr. Smith?
Just, I guess, an overall question for the properties today. Given workload, you probably haven't had a chance to visit them for this cycle, I'm sure.
I haven't been to this project, no. I've been to some of them.
But not for the 2020 cycle.
No, I haven't inspected any of them for this hearing today.
Fair enough. And the market value here, this is all model-driven valuation that we're looking at?
Right.
Okay, those are all of my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Do you mind sharing me where on the scale of your cap rates you've selected that 5.23?
Well, this is a 1972 building, so that would be, once they hit 75, then it would be 5%.
So that's 50, once they hit
1975,
1975.
so 74 and younger. This is at the top end of the
Okay.
5.3. The two factors that come into, it'll become evident further on, but one is age and one is size. When the properties get really small, the cap rates go down. And we'll get to, I think, one or two of those. But this is based on age, being that it's older than newer than 45, I believe, 1945 up to 75. So it's at the top end of the 5.3 range.
And how would you characterize this as for size? Small, medium, large?
This
98 suites?
is a
Large unit?
project.
Or large
Yeah.
project, yeah.
I think there's 13 buildings.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
So the model doesn't take into account the condition of the building at all, correct? Or the I know it's more than one building, but the buildings of the complex?
Well,
I mean, I know you.
in some ways it does. When we're looking at page 3, we have different categories that we rate this
Mhm.
property with our model, and it's excellent, above average, average, below average, and poor. This one with a 56.86% ratio would fall into the below average to poor range.
And does that get in, so when the model's calculating the cap, would that,
No.
in fact, it's in categories, no, it's more
No.
for the expense ratio?
The quality condition affects the rent and
And the expense
the
ratio?
expenses. So if you beat up the rent, raise the expenses,
That's where
then
you're,
your cap rate is remaining stable.
Okay. okay, that's all I have, thank you.
So, Mr. Lucky, I think you stated you didn't have a chance to inspect this property, correct?
No,
Yeah. So, do you have anywhere in your notes the last time it was inspected?
well, there's, I thought it would be in here. like the page, it would be, I guess, 8 after the site plan is artist's conception of a new building. I don't know why they built a new building, but there's at least one new building there. But I don't know if anybody's been out to adjust, like, look at that permit and then go out to the building to inspect it again.
Okay, sorry, you're saying there's a new building built? Is that what you just said?
Right. It doesn't, I don't think, affect the number of suites, it's just one's been replaced,
One,
at least one.
one of the entire buildings has been replaced, okay?
Yeah, it looks like,
Because it's not reflected on your page 1 at all for actual or effective?
no, because there's 13 buildings, so if, when the person inspects or handles the permit, they may change the effective age.
Okay. So because this is model driven, and this is a Manitoba housing project, is that not taken into consideration of what the condition of the building might be? Because it's Manitoba housing?
Is that good or bad? Like, I've been in a lot of Manitoba housing projects,
Well, just,
and
I would say,
they tend to be really well maintained.
okay, that's, okay.
Actually,
That's not my experience, but that's,
I've been in
since neither of us have been in this property.
I haven't been in this one, I've been in a lot of them. I mean, it's like any building you go in, some tenants are tough on their place and some aren't.
Okay. No, we'll wait to see what Mr. Smith has to say. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Madam Chair, I did have a brief bit of rebuttal as well that I forgot to mention at the beginning, just
Oh,
regarding,
okay. Regarding the calendar?
regarding some information, yes.
Okay.
It's
So do you want to do your presentation first?
Sure.
We'll ask questions and then you can give your rebuttal.
Certainly.
Thank you.
So with regard to the new construction that was mentioned, one single building there on the 13 building site, one of the buildings was in such poor condition that it had to be torn down and replaced. It wasn't economically feasible to repair the building, and it was decided that it was smarter to tear it down and replace that building with the same number of units on the same site, given that they still have 12 other buildings on site. Subject property is 9 to 33 Marlene, pardon me, starting to come down with a cold here. If you flip to my page number 3, we have some background on it, total of 98 units, and there's one of the buildings is apartment units, that's 32 two-bedroom units, and the remainder of the site is townhome units, and they're divided between 3 and 4 bedroom units, 36 3-bedrooms and 34 bedrooms. Obviously, this is a lot of units in the higher end of the range in 3 and 4 bedrooms. This is not standard in the marketplace. It's something that Manitoba Housing builds for the purposes of housing residents that are in need of social housing and low-cost housing. They're meeting a social need in the marketplace as mandated through the provincial government and their own mandate. So that is why they have so many 3 and 4 bedrooms. Certainly not a standard in the marketplace. Much more typical is bachelor 1 and 2 bedrooms with a heavy slant towards 1 and 2 bedrooms in the marketplace. There being most demand for those particular layouts in the marketplace for rent. So again, looking at page number 3, built in 1972. The property was appealed in 2018 and was reduced from just under 14 million to 8.9 million roughly. And it's now seen an increase of 23.7%, a little over $2 million, $2,115,000 for the 2020 assessment. Certainly this isn't something that we're seeing in the marketplace in terms of normalized increase in value for apartment properties. With regard to condition of the subject, it is a Manitoba housing property. Now, that being said, it's not because it's Manitoba housing that the value should be lower. It's because of the conditions that the properties end up being in through the use as social housing with Manitoba, through Manitoba housing. So if you look at the condition of this particular property, as I mentioned, the one property was in such poor condition that it was deemed wiser to tear it down and erect a new unit on site to house people rather than invest money into repairing it. It simply wasn't economically viable. That was the overall condition. Both there were some structural issues, but more than that, the interior was very poor as well. If you look at my interior photos beginning on page number 6, you can see that the property is dominantly original to the date of construction. Some of those are in the apartment building, and some of them are in the townhomes. Now, you can see the flooring is dominantly original, as is the finish in the kitchen and the bathroom. There's obviously a countertop that had to be replaced there, but at the same time you can see that there's missing doors and drawers, etc., as well as the general overall wear and tear. Now, that's pretty representative of that particular property on an overall basis. It certainly would be considered in below average condition. As Mr. Lucky had mentioned, we are in agreement on the net operating income when it comes down to it. The issue with regard to expense ratios of rent, etc., in arriving at the net operating income, the fact that the rent may be lower and the expenses may be higher are representative of that property in its condition. So is the property going to rent for a lower rent on the marketplace in comparison to normal market apartments? Yes, it is, but given the condition of it. Are the expenses for that property going to be higher given its condition? Yes, they are going to be higher. This is all fairly intuitive. Now, that does not impact the capitalization rate. That's merely a reflection of how the property would operate on the normal market. So moving on to the capitalization of that net income to arrive at market value. I don't want to go through material that all of us have perhaps heard. If Madam Chair is okay with that, I can certainly state it for the record, but if you're all aware of my general theme of my argument, I won't necessarily repeat it for you. What would be your preference there?
I will confirm.
Certainly, Mr.
I'm okay
Wick.
with it abbreviated.
Yes, I'm fine with that, yep.
Yep,
I've heard it.
You're fine with that?
abbreviated would be fine, thank you.
Okay. The Extreme Coles Notes version is that social housing has many issues that need to be addressed in selection of a cap rate. And they're all stated in my brief for you there. We've heard them before, and essentially it comes down to the fact that the risks that a potential investor would see for properties such as this will be higher than a standard market apartment. So the capitalization rate will necessarily be higher. The condition of the property certainly being one of them in this instance. The location of the property, for the subject property, yes, it is in St. Patel. If you flip to, and I grew up in St. Patel, so I know the area very well. If you flip to my page number 10, you can see the site outlined in red. The school that's located just to the west of that is Lavallee School. The area surrounding this is, has a great degree of social housing and lower cost housing in that immediate vicinity. So the fact that it's in St. Patel doesn't necessarily mean that the property should be worth significantly more necessarily, certainly. This particular area, and as you go down, Belleville has a great degree of both Manitoba housing and other social housing in that area. So that is the location of it. Yes, it's on the same river. That has, in fact, given them some structural issues with some of their buildings as well. So let's move on back to capitalization rate, page number 15. First, I would ask everybody to strike out my sale number 2 for the moment, 430 Yonge. We're doing some further background research on that particular property, so let's not consider it at this point in time before we've verified the new information that we've received on that. The cap rates that we present on page number 15 are properties that were purchased for their in-place income. They were true capitalization rates. They were not purchased for renovation. As I've stated to the panel here before, there are properties that are purchased for their renovation, to be renovated and have their income increased and the return to the investor significantly increased as well. These properties are not representative of that, so they are true capitalization rates. There was no further renovation required to these properties. They'd already been renovated at time of sale. So our cap rate range, as we're looking at it in our chart, runs from a low end of 5.44% up to a high of 6.65%. Now that's our cap rate range. The main market, or some of the major market participants in the commercial real estate industry, Colliers and CB Richard Ellis, obviously put out their own reports. These are brokers' impressions of capitalization rate ranges for particular market segments. And they're representative of the top end of the market, so the investment grade quality. So typically larger properties that would draw significant interest from larger investors with significant holdings and obviously good knowledge of the market. So Colliers is stating essentially a flat line with regard to capitalization rates. And between the 2016 and 2018 timeframes, of between 5.25% to 6% and 5 to 6% for low-rise apartments. CB Richard Ellis similarly has a flat line with low-rise A at 5.5 to 6 and low-rise B at 5.75 to 6% in the marketplace. Take note, 6% is the top end of that investment grade quality capitalization rate range. If you look at the bottom of page 17 on the right-hand corner, you can also see a chart from CB Richard Ellis, essentially indicating that you're looking at stable capitalization rate range, stable capitalization rates between that 2014 timeframe onwards in a general sense. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned regarding the subject property is the fact that we're looking at townhomes here, and many of the properties that we'll look at today are townhomes. There are fewer of them in the marketplace. They tend to have higher expenses given that there's more buildings often, there's more infrastructure in terms of systems, so heating systems, hot water tanks, all the things that you need in order to run a property. You're not running off of one main boiler and one hot water heater, etc. You've got a lot more things to replace as they come up. You also tend to have larger sites that they're on, which require maintenance as well. So there are fewer of them in the marketplace. They don't tend to trade very often, and there doesn't tend to be as much demand for this particular market segment as well. The other thing is the number of units in them tends to be higher, and in this case certainly it is. We're looking at 3 and 4 bedroom units. On the marketplace, there's much less demand for 3 and 4 bedroom units. So all of these factors point towards a capitalization rate above the top end of the general ranges that we're looking at. Now, pardon me, I have added a premium to our capitalization rate, and I've used a cap rate of 6.25% for the subject property. In hindsight, I could perhaps have been a quarter point higher than that, given the factors that I was stating here today. However, we've used 6.25%. And this gives us a final market value of $9,346,000. As I stated, the 2018 assessment was reduced to just over $8.9 million before the board revision here. The addendum materials include the income expense form, the Colliers and C.D. Richard Ellis information, and then I have quite a number of decisions from other generally Manitoba housing properties from this 2020 appeal cycle, indicating capitalization rates in their decisions of 6%, 6.25%, 6.5%. So all factors considered, I think we have a pretty fair market value at $9,346,000. Open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions?
Page 15, I guess, your cap rate sales. Well, before we get to the cap rate sales, this commentary here, this Richard Alton, MAI, is this American or?
Yes, I believe it even states there that perhaps it doesn't. He is American. He's an accredited appraiser in the United States under their governing body, which is equivalent to being an appraiser in Canada, as governed by the Appraisal Institute of Canada.
But social housing is a little different in the States, isn't it?
The general theme is the same, and we're talking theory here. We're not talking specifics of one program versus another.
Do you have any Canadian experts?
We don't have any Canadian experts that have written a book on the subject that I was able to refer to, no. But again, we're discussing appraisal theory, so it would not be materially different between that jurisdiction and this.
I hand this over. This is rebuttal on these cap rates.
You know what, we're gonna finish our questions first, and then.
Well, it's for questioning on his cap rates.
Okay, but I'm just saying that the panel is gonna ask their questions, and then you're more than welcome to, I think both of you have rebuttal on this, so.
Okay, it's the question about 333 Ward. How you arrived at 5.44 cap rate.
Right. So this one's come up obviously many times before the panel,
Right.
and our information taken directly from the purchaser of the property is that it was bought at a 5.44% cap rate based on their purchase price and their knowledge of the property and the income and expense that they had in place and that they anticipated going forward. So to that end, not in this cycle, but in the past cycle, I believe the purchaser has even presented an affidavit to the fact that they bought it at that level.
So I present the decision on that property and talk about it, or should I do that later? This is new evidence. Since all the discussions on 333 were, this is new.
Right, okay. But I'm just gonna ask, the panel is gonna ask questions first, otherwise we're really gonna get out of order, so,
Okay.
thank you. Did you have further questions?
Well, I guess on the rest of the cap rate sales, you've excluded foreclosure, sale number 2, you said.
Well, we're researching background on that at this point, but yes.
I
if
have the
it's-
transfer that says
If
it's a foreclosure.
If it is indeed a foreclosure and our information was incorrect, then we will remove it. And for today's
Okay.
purposes, we removed it.
So then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You have 1928, 1951, 1921, 29, and a 1972 on Balmoral. The highest sale is 2 million. Are really any of these comparable to well, our contention is it's an $11 million townhouse project on almost 4.5 acres.
Right, so point taken, I understand, obviously, the thinking, the thought process there. The cap rates that are presented here are essentially meant to frame an appropriate value. They're not specifically the same as the subject in that they're not of the same magnitude. Perhaps they're not built as new, not as recently built. However, most of these have been renovated. In fact, they had all been renovated prior to sale, so there was no upside in the purchase of these. So the fact that it was built in 1951 or whatever, yes, this original structure would be that, but they had seen significant renovation since that time frame. They are smaller, I certainly acknowledge that. If we had information on a property of this magnitude that was a true cap rate, we would provide that.
So on that point, this is a very important point to me. What you're saying is, if these were renovation sales, their cap rates would be much lower? If they required, so if these were sales that required renovations for an upside for the income, they would be, typically renovation sales have lower cap rates? Is that the contention?
The issue with regard to purchasing properties for further renovation and increasing the income and boosting the return is that that purchase is not based on the in-place income and expense. So any cap rate that's developed out of that is not a true capitalization rate. It's the purchaser is purchasing their future return, not the return that's in place at that time frame.
So the cap rates are typically lower.
They can be, it depends on what the property is purchased for.
So,
Purchase
with
that.
the same respect, wouldn't the subject qualify as a property that could be renovated and could have an upside and would warrant a low cap rate?
There is, and if you look at these properties and inspect them, etc., typically their condition is such that there'd be very significant investment required beyond the surface things of putting in some flooring and kitchen cabinetry, et cetera. The systems generally require updating, et cetera. So the subject, again, we're looking at largely townhomes, 3 and 4 bedrooms, et cetera. No, I would suggest that this would be a typical target on the market for that particular purpose.
Okay, we'll get back to work then.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitburn?
You provided evidence that 2018 assessment was changed from 13,780,000 to 8,906,000. Do you have any information that talks to the cap rates that were used in that assessment and review?
I did not represent the client at that time. I'm not sure if I've included the decision, if I had
I couldn't find
got
it.
it. If you didn't see it there, then it's probably not included, so I'm afraid I don't have it.
You wouldn't have that information. No, that's fine for now, thanks.
I've got no questions, thank you.
Mr. Smith, did you have a chance to inspect this property?
I did, yes.
Okay. So, the pictures that you provided at the beginning of your brief, that was just one unit, I'm
No.
assuming? Several units?
It was several units, yes.
Okay. How many of the 13 buildings were you able to look at?
How many did I go through?
Mhm.
I believe we walked through 2 buildings on site, the apartment and several of the units in one of the townhome buildings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were all in a similar condition?
They were, and obviously we asked, we walked the whole site and saw the others exteriorly. But in terms of getting into units, we went into the one particular townhome building. But we do ask the question of the on-site managers and maintenance people, et cetera. And what we saw was very typical of the remainder of the property. And I have visited the property in the past in 2015, and it was in much the same condition at that time.
Okay, so I'm just going to refer to page, where is it? Page 9 at the bottom, it's showing the kitchen with without covered doors, it looks.
Right.
So, are things of this nature then never attended to? They're not fixed, they're not corrected?
No, it's not that they're never corrected, it's that they happen more frequently, I guess is how I would put it. And obviously they need to budget or assign the money to do it, et cetera. As Manitoba Housing being a large organization, they have to
Right.
go through the process to get the money approved to do it. It wouldn't take any longer or much longer, I don't believe, than in a normal situation, but there is a process to walk through there.
Would you happen to know if Manitoba Housing has its own, or how should I put this, do they have a budget for each property they have in terms of refurbishing things?
I don't want to speak to that question too much in that I don't have all of the ins and
All right.
outs of their
That's
interior
fair
workings,
enough.
but I do know that their budget is obviously set annually, and they have a certain amount of money that is available for refurbishments, et cetera, and they assign that to the properties that are most in need, is I guess how I would put it.
So on your site inspection, how would you generally state the condition of this property?
This property is certainly in below average condition, in some cases below that, but obviously there's some variation between between units and between buildings, but they did have some Structural issues, as I recall, with the building that's at the very rear of the site and it's closest to the Seine River, so there's things of that nature as well.
And the building that was torn down and rebuilt, do you know what year that was?
It was done since 2016. I don't have a year on when it was actually built. I think, do we have any photos?
And
So
were
it's-
you-
It looks like it's being, oh yes, they were doing it at the time, when we were there in the summer this year.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you look at the top, page 5, you can see the exterior.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
Thank you.
I'm going to allow Mr. Lucky to go first, just to follow the process, if you're all right.
Sure.
Both present your rebuttals.
Do you have a rebuttal?
I do, yes.
So are you using that rebuttal for every file?
Actually, it's gonna be on this property, and then,
That's it?
yeah, I'm not gonna do this every time.
No, but did you, I'm just wondering if you wanted the document filed, exhibited on each.
No, that's fine, but just this
Did
one.
you want this exhibited on each one?
Yeah, I have one for each file, I believe.
Mr. Lucky, if you'd like to proceed with yours.
So I see that 333 Ward is, was in my evidence. I'm not sure about any of the rest of this following that.
The rest of it is just, as you put a whole bunch of random
And
cap rate decisions.
in my evidence brief that was submitted, yes, this is
Right.
all new information, I believe, and not addressed in my brief.
Well, let's start with the first one, 333 Ward. I think
Perhaps
we're all
we should
familiar
limit
with
it to
that.
333 Wards, that's the only
Sorry,
thing
that's just
in
what I'm gonna
evidence.
have a look at.
I would have put this in as evidence, but I thought that 5.1 was being used by Stevens.
Yeah, Mr. Lucky, I'm thinking we're gonna hear Ward,
Okay, that's fine.
okay? Thank you.
333 Ward, I was at the hearing, and Sid Story, who represents the owner, previously stated, and I mean, you can watch the tape, 5.44 was the cap rate. And when I asked him how he arrived at that, we agreed that the property sold for 18 million and the cap rate should have been 5.23. The efficiency that he claimed was to get rid of the caretaker. And then the board asked him, then who's gonna be the caretaker, and he couldn't answer that. In the end, and like I said, you can watch the tape, he admitted that it should be 5.23. That is this, that should have been the cap rate. So we're at 5, Altus is at 5, some people are at 5.44. The hearing, it was admitted by the owner's representative that the cap rate should be 5.23, and the board rounded it to 5.25. That's what happened.
Well, I am gonna say, sorry, that was on tape, and that's something that we are not going to be looking at today.
Great. Well, this is the decision. It's not 5.44.
So if I,
And, sorry,
Go ahead.
and is that the end of your rebuttal?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Certainly, so I take your point, and absolutely that, I would not perhaps use the word admission, but Mr. Story, I understand, probably stated that based on the in-place income and expense at the time of sale and the sale price, that it would be 5.25%. Did he not also discuss the intent of the purchaser and their knowledge of the operation of the building and the efficiencies of such?
Yes, and he talked about the efficiency would be to get rid of the caretaker. And the board asked, if you get rid of your caretaker, who's gonna look after the building? And he couldn't answer that.
So as a significant multifamily owner in the city of Winnipeg, his owner that he's representing there would obviously have a significant staff, et cetera, to handle such, and they wouldn't necessarily have on-site caretakers for all of their properties, would they?
But he admitted there wouldn't be one close enough.
We're not there. My knowledge is such that the astute investor that bought it was aware that they could operate it slightly more leanly, and that their resultant cap rate would be 5.44, and that has indeed how it has worked out since the purchase. That is my information. I don't doubt that that is exactly how the hearing went, and I acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whitbread, did you have any questions?
None, thank you.
And I have no questions either. We can proceed to your rebuttal, Mr. Smith.
Okay, and we'll try and be fairly efficient about this. This is, of course, with regard to the city's capitalization rates. I'm just trying to find it here in this brief. Is it not included in this one, Mr. Lucky, or
What?
the normal capitalization rate chart?
It's on page 5
Is it on page
of his
5?
brief.
No, I was referring to the specific sales that
Oh,
the
the
city's
sales
been
ones.
presenting. So that, are you aware, is it in any of the briefs, the 4 cap rates that the city has been presenting? I just assumed that it has been in all of the briefs that I've been looking at in recent days. Or are they all materially the same as the one we're dealing with now? I don't want to present new evidence.
Well, we
that's not
have
in there.
the cap rates here.
Yes, sorry, so there's a page that other assessors have been including where they have cap rates of each category, not CB Richard Ellis and not City of Winnipeg, but actual individual cap rates from specific properties. Is that not in the briefs here today? I made an assumption in bringing this, perhaps it's not in there.
It's not on this one.
Okay, well, that probably changes things. I can't really present rebuttal on material
Okay.
that is not
That's
present.
not present.
So I'll simply perhaps discuss without mentioning specific cases, or do you want me to just do that in one of the other properties instead of as rebuttal?
Sure. Or you can just give a summation, if either of you just want to give a summation on this.
Certainly. Okay, so The information that I was going to present was with regard to some sales that the city has presented, but more broadly, it speaks to properties that have been included in the city of Winnipeg's model when the evidence is such that they don't meet the standards for inclusion in ratio studies and inclusion in assessment model. So the city of Winnipeg is a member of the International Association of Assessing Officers, and they have regulations to follow. There is a document published by the IAAO, Standard on Verification and Adjustment of Sales.
Sorry, what page are we on?
We are flipping.
Are we doing this?
Sorry,
What
I
are we
thought
doing?
we were not doing this.
Okay, so it's difficult to summarize. The point,
I know,
okay,
but you just can't speak,
and that's
Mr.
fair.
Lucky has not included that information.
That's fair. So,
And I think you both have been quite clear on your positions on the cap rate.
okay, and that's fair. My point is that there are properties that are included in the city of Winnipeg's model that do not meet the standards for
Hold
Okay,
it,
but
what
now-
properties?
See, but
which isn't in evidence today, but that's
exactly,
that's
so
my
I just want
overall
to,
statement.
I just want to exclude that, Mr. Smith.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to move on to the next property.
Fair enough.
Well, I'd like to summarize too.
Okay,
Get
if you
his
wish
chance.
to.
I'll be brief.
Okay.
9 Marlene has been dealt with our model. We have a low quality on it, low rent, high expenses, so the cap rate doesn't need to be adjusted. And if you do go through these decisions that are included, the first one, 100 Charles Walk, that strikes me like a punch in the stomach, is the worst property, I call it, project in Winnipeg. It's in Lord Selkirk Park. It's built in the 50s. It has police offices in the project. Not a good comparison to the subject. And that's part of the difficulty when you're including decisions. That's why I threw some in. There's decisions that are 6.5, there's decisions that are 5. But we're looking at site-specific here, and like I said, I told as my direct evidence that this is, we put it as a low-quality property, and it should have the same cap rate as other properties. Thank you.
And I can tell you, Mr. Lucky, the board does look at site-specific. Thank you. Did you wish for a summation?
I do now. So following that, the valuation that is developed is based on site specific, the actual property, and what its place in the marketplace would be. So the resultant net operating income is reflective of the condition, obviously, and the expenses that would be incurred on that property. We've got 13 buildings on site here with I forget how many acres. Yes, you're going to have higher expenses for a property such as that. That does not address, does not materially impact that what would be used as a cap rate by an investor in purchasing this property. They are not directly tied in that manner that's being suggested. Now, one particular property decision was pointed to. I didn't individually select these decisions that are presented here, I don't disagree. 100 Charles Walk is in an extremely challenged neighborhood and does have many social issues regarding it. I would not say the same about 130 Tuxedo Avenue, nor would I say the same about 700 River Road, which is a cooperative development in South Winnipeg that is also townhouses coincidentally.
But-
There's a number of others here, so to point to one and say that the cap rate for that is not, we're not being fair in presenting it. There's quite a number there, and it covers a broad spectrum.
Right,
We're
and
not
as I
being selective.
stated earlier, we are looking site specific.
Fair enough.
so-
We're not being selective in the material presented.
Okay. Noted, thank you. Panel, are you,
I'm good.
you're good to go on?
Yep.
All right. We will go on to 27 Morrow Avenue.
Thank you. File number 194285 is roll number 0800217190. Manitoba Housing renewal ownership for 27 Morrow Avenue in St. Patel. Here we have a 1988 three-building townhouse complex. This one is on 1.7 acres. There's 50 suites, or 50 units on 3 buildings. Page 3 is our workup, and shows that there's 28 two-bedrooms, 22 three-bedrooms. And we agree on the NOI, difference of cap rate, and last go round, this was assessed at a little over 5.5, and it was reduced to a little over 5. That's for 18, and we're at 5,556,000. So we would ask that you maintain that assessment. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
Yes, in the past, the city of Winnipeg has had generally higher capitalization rates on townhouse properties. It's been what I have seen. Is that not part of the model for the 2020 assessment year?
For one reassessment only, we raised the cap rate for townhouse projects, and it backfired because all everybody did was just add another point to that, and effectively moving the field goal line. So our attempt was to try and settle them, but it didn't work. So anyway, that was tried for one reassessment, 2-year assessment. That was it.
So at that time, the city felt that capitalization rates would be higher for townhouses if they included it in the model, correct?
The model didn't change it, we manually changed it.
Okay, so the city manually changing it felt that cap rates should be higher on townhouse projects, correct?
In some ways.
Okay.
That's why some of the decisions from last go around are higher.
And the rest of the market value, it's model driven today? I'm assuming.
Right. Yes.
those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lichter?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Just to clarify, so the cycle where there was a manual adjustment to the caps for townhomes, that was the last cycle? Okay, thank you, that's all.
And,
That was the only time.
Yeah.
Mr. Lucky, again, did you have a chance to inspect this property?
I haven't inspected any of these
Okay.
recently.
Borough Avenue is exactly.
It's just off St. Anne's Road, almost backing on the Aqua Golf Course.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to give us your presentation?
Yes, so 27 Morrow Avenue, I'll just direct you to answer that particular question to page number 10 of my brief. You can see the location of the property on the east side of St. Anne's there, to the west of the Seine River. Again, this is an area, a great number of multifamily blocks, many of them are three-story walk-ups. There is, again, a significant amount of social housing in this particular area as well. So that is the location of the subject. Property was built in 1988, so it is a bit newer, and we do have a slightly more conventional mix of units, being 2 and 3 bedrooms. 29 2-bedroom units, 21 3-bedroom units, pardon me, total of 50 units on a 1.7 acre site. There's an aerial of the property as well shown on page number 9, just giving you an indication of the site layout and mix. So the units themselves have not been updated since that 88 timeframe. However, obviously 88 is newer than many of the properties that we'll be looking at. That being said, there is obviously significant wear and tear if you look at the flooring and the walls and the materials, etc. in here. There's a new counter that was put into the kitchen on page number 7 at the bottom there, but that again is replacement where required. This is not a property that's been refreshed. Again, being in that area adjacent to the Seine, they do at some times undergo some structural issues, as you can see on page number 8. This particular property would be slightly below average in terms of the condition of the units, I would say as well. And again, it varies unit to unit, but there is, it certainly would be below average. As stated, the net operating income that we're both in agreement with, and that takes us to capitalization rate. So subject property built in 88, still in below average condition. We have townhomes again, which are less in demand on the marketplace. Certainly with investors, you'll see very few sales of these properties. They tend to cap at a higher rate. However, we've only got 50 units here. Significant number of them are 2 bedrooms, with the balance being 3 bedrooms. So looking at both our evidence with regard to capitalization rates for improved properties and the market evidence, we have a general range of that 5.5% to 6% overall, 5.25% to 6%, taking into account A and B class walk-ups. If you look at C.B. Richard Ellis, low-rise Bs, they're 5.75% to 6%, 5.5% to 6% for the low-rise A's. Now, those are standard market apartments as well. We're looking at townhouses here, which again are in lower demand by investors on the marketplace. The cap rate that we feel is appropriate for the subject property based on all of this is 5.75%, which gives us our final market value of $4,831,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions?
When you were talking about cap rates, you said that townhouses sell at a higher cap rate. Do you have any evidence for that, or is that just, do you have any townhouse sales?
No, I would have included any townhouse capitalization rate sales, the point being that there's exceptionally few trades of them. I did have one from a number of years ago that would not be appropriate to bring at this point, that did have a significantly higher cap rate. It was just off of Portage Avenue.
So you don't have any cap rate sales?
I do not have any to bring forward today, because I see the city doesn't either.
Isn't the problem for lack of sales that many of these townhouses are turned into condos?
Not specifically. I don't deny that there are projects that get converted to condominiums, but I wouldn't say that that's the overall issue with them. That's one small component, but I wouldn't isolate it out to that. We get, say more broadly, that there's greater expenses and tend to have some higher vacancy when you have higher number of bedrooms, etc.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I'm good as well, thank you. Again, did you have a chance to do a site property
I did.
inspection? Okay. And you said you found it to be below average?
I did.
In terms of maintenance? Sorry, just from the previous property, I'm just looking on page 7 of your brief. It looks
Okay.
as though cabinetry at least isn't.
Yes, for that particular unit, you can see they had put in a newer countertop in that particular unit. Again, that would be based on the old one being damaged and having to be replaced, but the cabinetry is all the same as it was when the building was built,
Okay.
floors, etc.
Thank you. I'm assuming, gentlemen, you don't need a summation on this property?
All right.
I don't.
Thank you. And we'll move on to 26 Hastings Boulevard.
Thank you. File 191749 is roll number 0800331860. This is a Manitoba housing property located at 26 Hastings. There's it's a 1977 30-unit building on about an acre. Hastings is in St. Vital near Dunkirk, I guess roughly across from what used to be the, or I don't know if it's still the golf course or golf club for the, what was the canoe club? But you know what it is now. Is that right, or?
No.
Oh,
So I grew up and went to Hastings School. This is on Dunkirk, just before Parkville. If you know where Parkville is.
oh, okay, sorry.
Between St. Vital and Parkville.
Okay, so it's Dunkirk, wrong spot.
Is it north of St. Paul Road or south?
It is south of St. Paul.
Thank you.
Did you graduate?
Last time I checked.
Sorry. Couldn't help myself.
Do you want to know the year, Mr. Lucky? It was some time ago.
I'm sure you beat me. Anyway, so now we've discovered exactly where it is. We have, as I said, a 30 unit, 22 bedrooms, 10 3-bedrooms, and we're within $1,400 on NOI. So, you know, the model's working. And if the model works on NOI, it's working on cap rate. Our cap rate is 5%. This is a small development, and the age 1977 brings us into the 5 cap rate. And I would, you know, that assessment's only $100,000 a unit, so there's a lot of upside to this project. And I would ask that you maintain the assessment. It was, last go around, it was reduced from 2.9 to 2.752. We're at just over 3, so not much change. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Smith?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Mr. Whitburn?
No, I don't, thank you.
Just in terms of the, you had mentioned earlier, and I can't recall what the date was, you said, where is the cutoff rate for these properties on?
75.
75, so this is just above.
Right.
Okay, right, that's all I have, thanks.
And again, for the record, Mr. Lucky, this property was not inspected.
Right.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you'd like to proceed?
Certainly. So 26 Hastings Boulevard, as stated, built in '77. Shortly after I started school in that particular area. So I did actually visit the site to see friends in the very distant past, but that's not terribly important here today. The property itself, we're dealing with 22 bedrooms and 10 3-bedrooms. The photographs of the property are shown beginning on page number 4 and 5. Again, there is some replacement where required of cabinetry here. However, it hasn't undergone a full refresh or anything of that nature. If you look at the one unit that we were in did have to have some replacement. They hadn't gotten around to replacing the windows at that particular point, but they had to redo some of the kitchen area and bathroom, as you can see in that particular photo. So better to have some more pictures to show you the broader condition of the property. However, that's what we have. I think if you look at the bottom of page 8 as well as the top, you can see some general issues with the property, wear and tear, condition, etc. So it's not a property that has been fully renovated or anything of that nature. The location itself is right on Dunkirk. If you look at my page number 10, it would be on the east side of Dunkirk, between St. Mary's and Dunkirk in that location. Happy to answer questions on that if there are any. With regard to the income, I presented the expense allowance for the subject property. It is extremely close to the city's in this instance. So in this particular instance, I would suggest that we use the same NOI, which the city has of 151, 170. I'm not in disagreement with that. Ours is obviously based on the actual performance of the property, but the NOI is not an issue at this point. The subject property, again, we're looking at townhomes here. We have both 2 and 3 bedrooms. It would be typically in slightly below average condition overall. There's a fair bit of damage to flooring and walls, et cetera, that aren't necessarily present in the photos that are there, which would have an impact on the desirability of the property and to tenants and the amount of money that would be required to be spent on a property on purchase potentially as well. So, looking at this particular property, I have used a capitalization rate of 6%. Keep in mind, I haven't really gone through my brief and stated the issues, but we're not dealing with a standard market apartment here. When you buy a social housing property, you're inheriting the tenancies that are there. They have the legal right to remain under their current lease term, under the situation and the structure of that lease going forward. You then have issues with regard to any transition of those tenancies, et cetera. So the purchase of a social housing property is not the same as the purchase of a standard market apartment, and there is necessarily greater risk upon buying those. So the capitalization rate will obviously be higher by any astute investor in buying a social housing property versus a standard market apartment. I'm happy to go through those issues, but we've heard them many times. So the cap rate for the subject property is 6%, and this gives us, based on the NOI of $151,170, our adjusted market value of $2,520,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
I'm sorry. Are you revising your value? I missed that.
I did, I revised it slightly upwards. I used, as we were so close in NOI
Oh,
for
okay,
this, I
sorry.
used the
Yeah.
city's NOI.
Gotcha, okay, thanks.
Sorry, can you say that number again?
Yes, $2,520,000.
20, thank you.
Oh, I'm looking at the next one already, which is only 500,000, so I was wondering where. Gotcha.
That'd be quite an adjustment.
Yeah, I was wondering. Thank you, sorry.
Did you have any further
No.
questions? No. Mr. Whitbread?
Nothing, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Once again, you visit the property.
Yes.
Thank you, that's all my questions. We'll move on to Thomas Berry Street.
Thank you. File number 19, excuse me, -3375, roll number 06070087,100. And we had, the address is actually 159A Thomas Berry Street, capital A. We have a 1976 small, it's categorized as a townhouse building, but could be described differently, but anyway, there's only 8 units, and it's a 2-story, as I said. We have the same NOI. Because because of the size. I should state too, this is right near the St. Boniface Hospital. Could be one of the most prime rental locations. Anyway, we're at 709,000, last go around it was 613, reduced to 566. And I should mention that, you know, when these properties are reduced, we almost never appeal them, so.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I said, when the properties are reduced, our department almost never appeals to the municipal board.
Okay.
So we're not ever conceding that the reduced value is right, just that we typically don't unless it's point of law or something that we strongly disagree with. Do we ever appeal to the municipal board? The cap rate on this is lower than the 5 because of the size. And as you get into the smaller unit buildings, they become more and more closer to residential. And at some point, they're not traded by the income approach. They're more residential property than multifamily income producing. But anyway, this one is more than 4 units, and this is how we value it. And that's all I have to add on. That's all I have on this.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Mr. Smith?
Just with regard to what you just mentioned there, Mr. Leckie, so you're not suggesting that this property wouldn't trade based on an income basis? You're not suggesting it would trade like condominiums or anything like that, are you?
Could be. This is a really hot area, and the size of building that would catch the eye of a lot of small investors.
So, and that's fine, but they would have to generate a return on that, would they not? And so it would be based on the income in place, not them occupying a unit or anything of that nature.
There is no rents in place.
The rents that would be appropriate in the marketplace if it were.
Yeah, the rents are very high in St. Boniface. There is no rent in place.
So
It's
we were
geared to
addressing
income.
the issue of whether it would trade similarly to a single-family property or something like a condominium. That was my question.
It would have to be converted to condominium, but what I was saying is, as they get smaller, like in duplexes and fourplexes and whatnot, the cap rates don't really mean as much. Because sometimes people move into one unit, or family members, or they start falling out of typical income producing properties. And this one's close, but it's still an income producing property.
So the cap rate of 4.2% here, I'm looking at your chart on page number 5, so that would be virtually the best property out there, I guess. It's just about the low end of 4%, correct?
Well, it's also valued at $88,000 a unit.
Well, that wasn't my question.
Well, that's really low. The other ones we looked at are at 100.
That's not my question, no. The question was with regard to the cap rate of 4.2%. That's virtually at the bottom end of the range.
It would
is
be,
not?
yes.
Do we have any evidence of 4.2%?
Not here today.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Whitmore?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Just, when we were talking earlier about how the model is rating the condition of the property, so this expense ratio at 50.72, where would this property be falling in the condition on the model with that kind of an expense ratio?
I don't know. I'm guessing average to below average.
So would almost your lowest cap rate seem to make sense when that's the condition of the property, or it's the other factors that are being taken into account?
Size is a big
Size and location?
factor. Well, we don't.
Does the model take,
The
the
model
model doesn't
doesn't
take
take
that?
location
No.
into, but I mean, it does,
Well, it
in
takes
some
like a
ways,
broad
it
area,
has
right?
higher rents
Yeah.
in areas that have higher rent. So the St. Boniface rent would be applied to this.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Lucky, no inspection. Thank you. Mr. Smith, if you'd like to proceed.
Certainly, so property we're dealing with, 159 Thomas Berry. As mentioned, it was built in 1976, and we're dealing with a total of 8 units, 4 2-bedrooms and 4 3-bedroom units. They are townhomes. If you look at the photographs, they all have exterior access, etc. As you can see, there's an internal common area here. It is Manitoba Housing again that we're dealing with, and it's operated on a rent here to income basis. Now, photos don't necessarily show this exceptionally well, but it is certainly in much poorer condition than one would anticipate for a location such as that, for a property built in that time frame. Now, if you look at the photographs beginning on page 4, I guess, you have some exteriors. Then we have a property where they had to do some changes to the kitchen, obviously, as you can see. And then we move into the remainder of the units. You can see walls that have been had holes put in them and patched. You can see the wear and tear on the flooring and the walls and the stairs, the bathroom, all being original. Page number 8 at the top, it doesn't show particularly well, but that floor is in exceptionally poor condition. Now, that being said, as Mr. Lucky mentioned, we're dealing with a good location. Property is well situated in St. Boniface, close to the St. Boniface Hospital. That's not in doubt. It is a lower unit count at 8. However, I certainly disagree that this would trade based on nature of residential property. It's an 8-unit multifamily property. It's going to trade based on the return to an investor. So what would that return be in the marketplace? Now, looking at the subject, obviously condition is not great for it. I have further notes here with regard to that particular inspection of that property. Suffice to say, it would be below the condition that you would expect for a property of that vintage in that location. Looking at capitalization rate, yes, there are going to be more investors if there are for properties that have a lower unit count. However, we're not dealing with a duplex here or a fourplex or anything of that nature. We do have 8 units. They are 2 and 3 bedroom units. Again, looking at unit type, 3 bedroom units are in less demand on the marketplace. So you do tend to have greater vacancy for those in the market as well. And obviously that would have an impact on value in terms of what an investor would be willing to pay for it. Now, looking at cap rate appropriate for the subject property, is this property going to trade at a cap rate below the range that the main market participants are seeing, or the evidence that we have with regard to a trade of property built in 2006 in South St. Patel at 5.5% cap 5.25. If you look at the evidence that the city is providing, not very likely, particularly given the conditions. So we've used a cap rate of 5.5% in our analysis, and that gives us our final market value of $541,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
Well, on the cover of your report, isn't that a new envelope for the building?
On the exterior,
Yeah.
yes, I believe they had redone the exterior at some point.
And the windows?
I don't specifically recall the windows, Mr. Lucky, so I think we'd both be speculating if we were to talk about that.
Okay. Bottom of page 5, but isn't that the newer kitchen cupboards?
I did state that, and again, that's repair that had to occur. Property was built in '76, so they're not original, that's not an original cabinet, obviously.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitford?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I'm good as well, thank you.
And again, you inspected this property.
Yes.
Sorry, did you state that it was below average?
Certainly the units that we went through would be.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lucky.
Sure. File number 19-3344, roll number 06060151000, 779 St. Joseph Street, another Manitoba housing property. This is, was built in 1988, or 86, sorry. There's two buildings, and almost an acre of land. Page 3, we have, again, the same NOI and difference of cap rate. In 2018, it was listed, or it was assessed at $1,357,000, and it was, assessment was confirmed by the board at that time. No municipal board appeal. Again, a smaller property in a good location, and I would ask that you maintain the assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitford?
No questions.
No questions? Again, for the record, Mr. Lucky, that you did not inspect this property?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. If you would like to proceed, Mr. Smith?
All right. 779 St. Joseph Street. I'll get you to flip to my page number 8 so you can see the location from the aerial. It's also in St. Boniface, in that north St. Boniface area towards the CPR tracks there and towards Whittier Park. The subject property built in 1986 has not undergone a refresh of any nature. The finishes are original to the property, and it would certainly be in below average condition. Very worn. We have some stucco issues on the exterior of the property as well. There was some water damage. There is You can see the, from the photographs of the property beginning on page 5 on the interior, the original finishes from that time frame and the wear and tear that they've undergone, obviously. So it would be considered to be in below average condition in the marketplace. We are looking at a total of 14 two-bedroom units. This is a better suite mix than having 3 or 4 and 5 bedroom units, obviously. The location in St. Boniface would be a positive factor, certainly in the property. Looking at the number of units at 14 units as well, obviously that's lower than many of the properties that are out there. However, it's greater than the one we were just looking at. The condition of this property would probably be inferior to the one that we were just dealing with as well, in my estimation, having viewed it. And our capitalization rate that we've applied to the property, based on all of this information as well as what I've discussed already in this hearing, is 5.75%. So you have a property that is well located. It has a lower number of units, however it is in poorer condition and has significant deferred maintenance for that property as well. So looking at both our cap rate evidence as well as the main market participants, where the general range is in that 5.5 to 6% range for low-rise B properties. We're at 5.75%, right in the middle of that range. We really do not see properties trading at below 5 caps where the property is acquired for the in-place income and expense, and indeed that is what we're dealing with today. We're not dealing with any potential future of a property. We're dealing with the property as is, where it is, in the condition that it is at the valuation date, or in today's date as of the valuation date rather. So using our 5 3/4 cap rate, our final market value is $1,273,000. Just with regard to any prior appeal in 2018, I did not represent the client at that time frame. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Leckie?
No questions.
Mr. Whitford?
No questions.
No questions?
Again, you viewed the property.
We did, yes. This one I did not walk through myself, as we had 125 of them, but I did not. We did inspect it, and I have the notes and reviewed all the photos, and obviously discussed it with the person that went through it from our staff.
Panel, are you still okay to continue?
I wouldn't mind 5 minutes.
Sure. We're just going to take a quick 5. Okay, I'm going to call this hearing back to order. And we are going to proceed to 715 Luelda. Mr. Leckie, whenever you are ready.
Thank you. 715 Luelda is file 19-1762, roll number 0206120900, 715 Luelda Street. And this is a 1971 11 building, 1 and 2 stories, built in 1971. There's 58 units, and this is on roughly 3.5 acres. I would call this Valley Gardens. Isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's,
Some call it.
it's in that Concordia area.
Yeah, right near the Concordia Hospital. And we, the mix, the split assessment, tax-wise, it makes no difference. It's just that 10 is lesser units, and the 20 is more units. So it's 4 units or less. The 10 is residential. It just, there's a building with less units than the buildings. It's 4 units, and then the bigger buildings are class 20. But like I said, it doesn't have any effect on value. It's just how we.
So just the size of the buildings on the property.
Is
Exactly.
making the split.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they're portioned the same. Everything's the same.
Okay.
It's just that there's a different class code for it, but it has no effect on value. So, there's 48 3 bedrooms, 10 4 bedrooms, and this is all model. We agree on the NOI again. Cap rate is the only issue, and because this is a 71, it's at the higher end of the 5.3 cap rate buildings. And I think that's all there is that I have to say on that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, questions?
No, you actually clarified the one question I had. I never quite understood what that difference was regarding the 10 and the 20, but
It's
now
4 units.
now I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Woodbury?
No question.
Stevenson?
No questions.
Once again, Mr. Lucky, you did not inspect the property. Thank you. Mr. Smith, would you like to proceed with your presentation?
Certainly. So, dealing with 715 the Welva Street. Again, this is Manitoba Housing, operated on rent here to income basis. The subject property, we have some details on page number 3 regarding it. It is on a 3.5 acre site, built in 1971. And again, we're dealing with townhouse units here, 48 3-bedroom units and 10 4-bedroom units in this case, for a total of 58 units. The property was appealed in the 2018 cycle and was reduced from $5,248,000 down to $4,414,000. And our market value that we arrived at for the subject property for the 2020 cycle is $5,220,000. The photographs of the property begin on page number 4. You can see some exteriors there, as well as the interior. Again, it was built in 71. It has not had a full refresh. It has had a number of units that did have some issues where they did do refreshes. You can see that evidence on page number 7 and the top of page 8, but that's not the majority of the property. The majority is like the remainder of the photographs. So it is of its vintage, significant wear and tear. And if you look at bottom of page number 8, obviously we have some cracking of foundations occurring, etc., which is obviously an issue going forward. Looking at location, the site itself is shown on page number 9, and then as Mr. Lucky had mentioned, the property would be located north of Concordia there, in between Molson and Raleigh, in that Valley Gardens vicinity. The net operating income we are in agreement on. Again, the condition of the property, if you look at some of the photos, it doesn't necessarily show this as we see one of the refreshed units, but if you look at the remainder of the property, we have significantly dated finishes, a lot of wear and tear, and significant deferred maintenance that is present for the subject property. Beyond that, we're looking at townhouse units again and higher unit count. So again, the most in-demand units in the marketplace are your 1 and 2 bedroom units, with bachelors slightly below that, obviously. We are looking at 3 and 4 bedroom units in the subject property. These tend to be slower to lease, greater vacancy, and as such, less of them are built, and they are certainly in lesser demand as an investment property. So our capitalization rate for the subject property is 6.25%, which produces our final market value of $5,220,000. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
No questions.
Mr. Whitburn?
No questions.
Ms. Stevenson?
I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there's been some upgrades, and I'm just, when I look at the 2018 assessment at $4,414,000, and you're up at $5,002,000, is some of that upgrading happened since the last assessment? Is that why?
No, that's, I'm not, I don't have a specific date on when that particular unit would have been done, and I don't have the timing to relay to you, so that's not the basis of my
Okay.
evaluation.
Okay. So it's not related to that. Okay, that's all I had then, thank you.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Smith, you inspected this property?
We did, yes.
Did you yourself? or did
This
you
is not
call
one
it?
that I personally walked through, but I obviously review it with our, the member of our staff that did so, and reviewed the notes and the photos, and got a very strong sense of the property, obviously.
And I'm sorry, you may have stated this, but did you say it's below average?
This one would be below average, yes, slightly below average. Somewhat better than a few of the others that we have seen, but again, we're looking at 3 and 4 bedroom units, which is taken into account in the cap rate.
Oh, sorry, one last question. Page 3 of your brief. You are stating that this property was reduced in the 2018 assessment?
That's correct.
Was that based on cap rate?
I am not sure, I did not represent the tenant, and I don't have that document for you.
Thank you.
Not the tenant, the owner, pardon me.
We are going to move on to 1184 Plessis Road.
Thank you. 1184 Plessis is file number 19-3263, roll number 0900704500. We have a large townhouse, Manitoba housing property. There's 19 buildings. And it was built in 1973. There's 90 suites. And it's 7.5 acres. Again, the buildings that are only 4 units are the class code 10G is grantable and grants in lieu of taxes. And and the 20 is the units, the buildings that have more than 4 units. We agree on the NOI, difference in cap rate. I was, I was looking at the land values almost approaching, but anyway, I don't have land sales, but I mean, it's something to consider with properties this large is redevelopment. And anyway, I would ask that you maintain our assessment of 106,000 a unit, which is totals 9,583,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I'm good as well.
Mr. Lucky, again, this property was not inspected.
Not recently, no.
Okay.
Been there a long time ago.
Thank you. You would like to proceed, Mr. Smith?
Yes, so just statement to start, I guess, our task here today is to value the property as it sits today, as if it were to trade on the valuation date, not what any potential future use of the property could be, or any potential future state of the improvements on it, etc. So looking at the subject property, 1184 Plessy, we have a property built in 1973. Again, we are looking at townhouse style multifamily property, total of 90 units, and the suite mix in this property is certainly on the higher end as far as unit bedroom count. So we have 23 two-bedroom units, and we have 42 three-bedroom units, 19 four-bedroom units, and 6 five-bedroom units in the subject property. So this is certainly abnormal in the marketplace. The demand in terms of renters and certainly in terms of investors for properties such as that with the high number of bedroom units is certainly less. If it were more demand, you would see more of it out there. Obviously, that is not the case. Our typical multifamily properties have 1 and 2 bedroom units. In some cases, they'll have a few 3 bedrooms and or bachelors, but beyond that is certainly not evident in the market. So looking at the subject property, I would certainly consider this one to be in average condition. This one is well maintained. There has been some change to some of the units, as you can see. Those that haven't been changed are not in as rough condition as some of the others that we have been looking at. So that's one factor to consider in arriving at our market value. Now, that's one factor alone, condition, obviously. Now, the structure was originally built in '73, so it's not a new structure or anything of that nature. The location of the property I did not mention necessarily. It is in that Transcona area on Plessy between Pandora and Dugald, if you look at the aerial on page number 8. The suite mix for this particular property, again, highly unusual, certainly in lower demand, would tend to have greater vacancy in units of the higher bedroom count, and would certainly draw less interest from investors in the marketplace for that reason. So looking at all of these factors considered, we have a cap rate of 6.5% for the subject property. It may sound like I'm nitpicking, but that is a strong concern. Having units of 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms is not a standard investment, and would certainly draw a premium in the marketplace from any investor. So using our cap rate of 6.5% gives us a market value of $7,814,000. If you flip back to page number 3, you can see that the property was reduced in the last cycle from 9.5 million to just under 7.2 million, and our market value here today is 7,814,000 based on our analysis. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky?
No questions.
Mr. Woodbury?
No, thank you.
So just, because you said that that you would have put this at average condition, so that's a little better than what you've been saying with some of the other ones. So the
Certainly.
6.5 is based on this suite mix mostly then?
Yes, and it's not a minor point. It's when you're buying a property, obviously you're looking at what your return is going to be, and if you have a suite mix that is well beyond the norm in the marketplace, and you have a lot of those units, what is your vacancy going to be on those? And are you going to have to offer incentives to get people into them? Is your rent going to be lower than you would want it to be, et cetera? So all of those factors considered, your cap rate is going to be higher than a standard market apartment, but higher again because of the unit count. So yes, it's in an average condition, but that factor is significant in arriving
Okay.
at the
Thank
cap.
you, that's all I have. Thanks.
Mr. Smith, you inspected the property?
This one I did, yes.
This one you did. Okay.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes.
redirect? Thanks. 1973 was the build date, built by Manitoba Housing for social housing.
Yes.
Do you know that? That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, I'm just gonna ask this, just general knowledge. Would you say that the properties that we are seeing today have average, sort of an average built? It's not a superior built in any way? Things are not upgraded, it's in general?
In general, certainly they would not be above average. I mean, average, they're built to Manitoba Housing standards, so they're wanting to house the maximum number of people and so they tend to have smaller suite sizes, and they finish them with a basic level of finish that they intend to be long lasting, but they often have wear and tear, so they don't put anything nice in particular into the units.
Okay.
It's not perhaps phrased the best, but that's what came to mind.
Now we are moving on to our last property at 394 Keenly Side Street. Mr. Lucky, whenever you would like to take us through this.
Thank you. We have file number 19-1753, roll number 0205-1155-000, 394 Keenly Side Street. Final Manitoba Housing townhouse property for today, again built in 1971. 91 suites, and it's sitting on 7.3 acres. So same thing, a lot of land. Just properties, I was just looking at the pictures, at this age, they had full basements, which isn't typical for townhouses. There's 52 3-bedrooms, 39 4-bedrooms, and we agree on NOI and differ the cap rate. The 2018 assessment of $8,659,000 was confirmed at the Board of Revision. And this is located, I think it's still called Elmwood, behind that strip near the crossroads. It would be north and west of the crossroad intersection. So anyway, I would ask that you maintain the assessment as being fair and equitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Smith?
No, I have no questions.
Mr. Whitbread?
I guess one question, and it's just well, it's specific to this property, but it certainly applies to the other ones. I've been going through and doing your term of reference over term of reference increase in values. And it looks like this property is going to get about a 43% increase in value over the 2018 reference date.
No?
No? What do you show, sir?
Well, it was, it's like 2 million divided by 8, 6, 5, 9, 23%.
Do you show an 8,919,000 reduced to 7,477 in 2018?
No, 8,659,000 was
I
confirmed.
think this
Yeah,
one's
it's
2016 for
2016.
some reason.
Okay.
Yeah,
My
I noticed
apologies.
that, I noticed
That's
that
okay.
too.
I noticed
the
that
same
too.
thing.
Yeah, because I had done some other, you're right,
Yeah,
it was 23.
That's the only one that's been 2016.
So notwithstanding that, does 23
Yeah,
sound like a reasonable percentage to you?
The average was 15.
It was 15, eh?
And I should, again, I want to point out that if they were reduced last time, we didn't necessarily agree.
No, I understand
We,
that.
we adjusted the model, like, we would, after the hearing, we look at the decision, and I do the analysis, is the assessment wrong? And if it's wrong, then we adjust that model. And like I said, we can take it down or up. And housing properties are almost all at below average or poor. So that's why I was saying we have them at the lower end of the spectrum already.
So you have the ability to tweak
The model, right.
which would then reset for the next term of
Right.
reference.
If it was
If
reduced,
necessary.
if it was reduced to a certain amount, and we look at it and we go, we don't agree with that. We're already at poor, or we're already at below average, and that's right, and we wouldn't change it.
And
And
you-
it would go up more the next. After this, we don't know next go around what the cap rate's gonna be.
Okay.
So that's, the model kind of stays somewhat consistent, how we treat this property. But next go around, there, the rents could go up or down, or cap rates could change, and that we don't know. But like I said, we make every effort. And then on top of that, we have a program called the percent change. So we try and look at all the properties that fall outside that 15% change. So if something did change 23 or 30 or
43.
40 or whatever,
Yeah.
hopefully we would get to that and look at it, and somebody would try and determine why. And sometimes it's because, the income and expenses are going all over the place. and you're hitting it in a point in time. But, you know, for the next, like for this reassessment, somebody could have looked at the income and expense statements and said, is our 2020 number gonna be right? So we actually, there's a lot of hands-on
Okay.
to these assessments. It's not just, you know, this model spewing all these things out.
Earlier in the hearing, Mr. Smith introduced evidence that talked to a Winnipeg cap rate. One of his graphs indicated a pretty flat ride for cap rates in Winnipeg. Would you agree with that, generally speaking? For the Winnipeg market?
Cap rates aren't changing a lot, no. You know, and if you look at, and ours aren't changing a lot. You know, they haven't really changed much. We've tweaked, you know, like we're using lower rates for the smaller buildings now. Before it was only factored by age. We're looking at other factors.
Yeah, I think you've made a good distinction today in
Yeah.
indicating that as we
And we,
files.
you know, we meet with the modelers before the cap rates are gone out, and we look at actual sales. We look at all the experts or, you know, industry information and all that kind of thing. And, you know, we try and determine if our cap rates are right. So it's, there is, I just wanted to point out, there's a lot of hands-on. It's not just this model.
Are you one of the people that's well-trained in the use of the model? I know there's.
I don't do
different
any
levels of training.
modeling.
Oh, you don't do the modeling? Okay.
As you can tell.
No pun intended.
No, we have a separate department that
Okay.
builds the model,
Yeah,
but we're experts in apartments. I only do apartments. I used to do Manitoba housing for them.
but you're not a modeling guy.
Against the city.
You're not a modeling guy.
No,
Okay,
but we meet with them to make sure that, you know, we're on the same page. Because we're looking at these things all the day, apartments.
that's fine, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you.
I just had a quick clarification, because I meant to ask you this before and I forgot. You said when these have been reduced, that you're generally not appealing them. Were you talking specifically on Manitoba housing properties in that point?
In this reassessment, we're, you know, a good chunk through it already. I don't know if any that our section has appealed to the municipal board.
So you're talking multifamily in general then?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
I was
there's,
just trying, I wanted to clarify, if it was just Manitoba housing properties you're talking about, or are you
no,
talking about? multifamily in
apartments,
general?
period. And what I said is that, you know, if there's a legal issue.
Yes, no, I understood that, yeah.
Or if something is just so, like if it sets a precedence or, but it has to be like really overwhelming
Yeah.
for us to
Okay.
appeal.
Great, that's all I had, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lucky, I think when you were talking about this just a few minutes ago with Mr. Whitbread, did you state that this property in particular has gone up 23%? Was that
Right,
right?
it has.
And you said the average was 15?
I think somewhere around
Yeah,
50.
That's what I wrote down.
So I'm just wondering, does the city give any consideration at all when it comes to Manitoba housing properties in terms of increases? Do they treat them the same?
They're all treated the same.
They're all treated the same.
We've dealt with a lot of them, and I'm familiar with most of them. But we've put the quality down on pretty much most of them, if not all of them. Like, I don't think you'll find any that are at average. They're all gonna be below average or poor. The ones that are chronically getting reduced or sitting at poor, they're all pretty much at below average. And that's the same with like, these aren't, like, we can't single them out, like, I can't, you know, we don't have a category for, you know, owners. We have a category for townhouses and different things like that, but we don't have owner categories. We could search by owner. But a lot of these types of townhouses aren't owned by housing. They could be by nonprofit groups or sponsor groups or co-ops or different types of ownerships, whereas they're the same type of product.
Okay, thank you. I think you have to give us your presentation.
Yes.
Thinking.
So just to clarify, I think it had been mentioned, the property in the last cycle, and again, I did not represent Manitoba Housing in the 2018 cycle. I believe it had been mentioned the property was confirmed at that particular value of 8659, so any increase from that is from that original assessed value. So that is your starting point. I don't know if it was appealed beyond that. I know that there were not many of their properties were appealed by the prior representative for some particular reason. I'm not certain why that is the case. It seems an oddity, but I would suggest that perhaps that 23% increase is starting from an artificially high level, perhaps, in my viewpoint. Moving on to the subject property, we're looking at 394 Keenly side. The property was built in 1971. And we're looking at a total of 91 townhome units for this particular property. 52 of those being 3 bedrooms, 30 of them being 4 bedrooms, and 9 of them being 5 bedrooms. So again, we have a property that would not be built by a standard market multifamily developer building 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units. Does not occur in that marketplace. This is Manitoba Housing fulfilling their mandate of providing social housing to those in need. So you have a very non-standard development in terms of the units that are being provided on the marketplace. And again, does not gel well with investors' typical expectations of return on their investment. They're serving their purpose by building properties of this type in the locations that they build. The property location is shown on both pages 10 and 11. It is located in that East Elmwood area on Keenly side. If you look at page number 10 in the site aerial, you can see that it's located immediately adjacent to the rail tracks that pass by it to the north of the property. The property itself, the photos are shown starting on page number 4. You can see some of the exteriors and interiors. Forgive me for just a moment, we got sidetracked here. They did have some roofing issues for this particular property. Again, it was inspected this summer, so the photos are from that time frame. You can see much of the flooring and the finishes are original. You can see the lovely pink tile at the bottom of page number 6 in the bathroom. Original flooring on 7. Obviously a bit of a refresh in one unit on page number 5 there as well. So there has been some degree of investment into this property. I don't have the number of units that has, but it would not be a significant number of them. And again, with this property, we have a basement, and they do obviously have some foundation issues in this location as well, as you can see from the photo of the basement area. Most of the property would look more similar to my page number 8 in terms of kitchen build-out, as well as bathroom on page number 9. Location on pages 10 and 11, and we can then move into valuation comparison. So the subject property, again, the unit count, we have 91 total units, none of them being 1 and 2 bedrooms. We're starting at 3 bedrooms with 52 units, 34 bedroom units, and 9 5-bedroom units. This is, again, well beyond the market standard, and unusual on the marketplace, and certainly in lesser demand from tenancies out there who tend to have higher vacancies. And it's not a category that is in demand. Certainly 3 to 5 bedrooms is beyond the norm. That being stated, the property is in relatively good repair. There are some issues, obviously, with some water penetration, some cracking, but the overall interiors would be better than some that we've looked at today. Still Manitoba housing, but I would put it at just slightly below average in terms of interior condition. That being said, again, we're looking at the unit count as a significant factor here as well as obviously the issues that I glossed over in the beginning, but which we're taking into account with regard to issues upon sale of social housing and the other issues regarding risks surrounding social housing. Happy to go through those if we need to, but I think we've all heard this several times already. So, looking at the property as a whole, we have used a cap rate of 6.25%. Again, relatively stable range of 5 to 6%, 5.5 to 6% for the B class low-rise apartments, being relatively stable in that range. Our evidence suggests exactly the same thing, perhaps slightly higher. And so we have used a cap rate slightly above the top end of that range at 6.25%. Now again, we're not relying on the industry reports on which to base our cap rate, but if you look at it in that manner, we are slightly above that range with a very non-standard mix of units. So this gives us our final market value of $9,057,000. Just to speak with regard to the classification of properties, etc., and this comes up or has come up in the past. It's not that Manitoba housing properties should get a lower valuation because they're Manitoba housing. It's that Manitoba housing properties are very specific to their cohort in that they either have, 90% bachelor units that are very small in substandard locations, or they have units that are beyond the norm for the marketplace, being in the 3 to 5 bedroom range. The wear and tear of the properties tends to be greater, deferred maintenance, etc. And obviously the other issues that I've discussed regarding risk. So it's not that they deserve to have their valuation changed because of who they are. It's because of the properties that we're looking at and the condition and these other factors that need to be taken into consideration. So the adjustments to the property in the model being below average, etc., not specific to this property, but in general, would be reflective of what those would generate as far as income and expense. Then you have to capitalize that property, and that is where the gulf comes in. The city does not appear to be reflecting what these properties would trade for on the market based on a cap that would be applied by an investor. that is my presentation. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucky, questions?
On the cover of your report, doesn't it show that the envelope's been replaced?
I don't have that information in front of me, I'm afraid. And so we'd both be speculating with regard to that.
Well, I've never seen a housing project with this kind of finish. Is this typical?
Is it typical of all of their properties? I mean, there's obviously variation between properties that they have.
The original was either stucco or it was 4x8 sheets of paneling.
Well, I would estimate that between 1971 and today's date, probably the exterior has changed, yes. I do not
Oh,
have
you don't know when.
date of that. I couldn't tell you that it were 2015 or 2001 or 1988.
And then on page 5, this looks like new kitchen covers.
Yes, as I mentioned, there was some renovation, rehab rather, in the property, but it wasn't, to my knowledge, a significant number of units, and it is more typical if you look at my page number 8.
And on page 6, you have picture of the crack here in the wall. You mentioned that the place has structural problems?
No, just that it has shifting occurring, obviously, as shown. I'm not saying that it has significant structural issues, just that it has shifting occurring.
I live in River Heights, I wish my foundation looked like this.
Not saying it doesn't happen in other locations.
So, and then the picture, that like, they never had pink, this is just the flash, isn't it? Pink tiles and pink tubs, and isn't that just the way that the picture's
Well, it was
taken?
built in 71.
71.
I know
Yeah,
that.
but the tub and the tiles are pink? This is the flash. I've never seen a pink,
My father's home on Weaver Bay in Hastings has a pink tub and pink tiles around. There's also the lime green, which is nice, or avocado, I think they called it.
well, in housing, they put white tile, white tubs, and white tile floors. So I was just suggesting that
Nevertheless.
it's just a photograph, anyway. So then on page 7, this looks like, this envelope's been, same thing, isn't that a newer, updated envelope of the building? New windows? Or newer? They're white vinyl.
Some of those windows would certainly be not there from 1971.
Sure. Okay, yeah, no further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No questions, thanks.
Stevenson?
This is just for my own edification here. You keep mentioning 5 bedrooms in the last couple of properties, so on the cities, the 5 bedrooms end up in your 4-bedroom count? Is that how it works?
Right, we don't
Okay,
have
yeah,
another
okay,
category.
so, all right, I'm just clarifying that because you didn't have any listed, so that's all I had, thank you.
Mr. Smith, again, you inspected the property.
Yes.
Condition? Overall,
Would be slightly below average.
slightly below?
Yeah.
And just a question pertaining to all the properties we've heard today.
Mhm.
Do any of them have a pest control issue that you're aware of?
I did actually ask that question as part of it. So we're doing obviously a fairly broad project for Manitoba Housing here, and that was one of the questions that was put to them. As with much of the marketplace, there is an issue with bed bugs, not in every single property, but they do have that issue, and they have a program to treat it.
But specifically in any of the properties we've heard today that you are aware of?
You know what, I did not bring that particular folder with me. I would have to go back and look at the ones that we were dealing with. I know that it was fairly common throughout the Manitoba housing portfolio to have the bed bug issue, given the number of move-ins and outs and
Right.
just the cohort that they serve.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just gonna ask you, I'm assuming no need for a summation. I think we've pretty much heard all the information today.
Don't think we need one.
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and this hearing is closed.
Thank you.
Thanks.